ground fog and low cloud stopped all low-altitude deliveries. The only option was to parachute supplies into a drop zone just outside the perimeter. Several thousand tons would arrive this way, but still for the Marines, bad weather invariably meant tight rations. Although the battle to supply the main base was being won, the hill outposts were a much bigger problem. A fifth of Khe San's manpower was stationed on the hills. The men were suffering almost 50% casualties, and the posts depended completely on helicopters for supply. For the crews of helicopters supplying the hill outposts, every mission was a gamble with death. North Vietnamese gunners were quick to target the approaches and the landing zones. Anti-aircraft fire followed the helicopters in, and as soon as they landed, mortar crews and machine gunners opened up. As the slopes of the hills became a graveyard for American helicopters, the Marines realized that the survival of the hill outposts was under serious threat. And if they fell, the main base couldn't last for long. Air commanders worked frantically to devise new tactics for getting helicopters in and out of the hilltop bases safely. The tactics the Americans devised depended on swamping the enemy anti-aircraft guns and mortars around a landing zone with a high-speed assault. "12 Skyhawk fighter bombers, 4 Huey gunships, up to 16 supply helicopters, and an airborne command and control aircraft all acted together. The first stage was for 4 Skyhawks to hit North Vietnamese positions with bombs and napalm. 2 more laid tear gas. Next, 2 Skyhawks dropped smoke bombs to create a corridor, and 30 seconds later, the transport helicopters swooped in, covered by the Huey gunships. Meanwhile, 4 more Skyhawks with rockets, bombs, and guns made close-in attacks. The whole operation was over in less than 5 minutes. The new tactics quickly earned the title Super Gaggle because the helicopters looked like an oversized flock of geese. With the fighters and gunships in the air too, the method took incredible timing to pull off successfully. But it worked. Only 2 more helicopters would be shot down supplying the hill outposts. By now, the strain of the long siege was beginning to tell on the troops at Khe Sanh. Being under shell fire every day meant a steady drain of casualties and constant tension. Food was often down to 2 sea ration meals daily. Conditions were appalling. The bunkers were knee-deep in filth and mud and overrun by rats. In addition, it was impossible to forget that up to 20,000 enemy soldiers were waiting for the signal to storm the base. To stop the men brooding about their possible fate, officers and NCOs kept the troops as busy as possible. Digging trenches, filling sandbags, and improving bunkers was a big part of every day. There was some patrolling too, although not more than 500 yards from friendly lines. Colonel Lowndes had no intention of sending his men into certain ambushes, and in any case, they had to be kept clear of the Niagara bombing raids. On the base perimeter, the watchword was constant vigilance. The North Vietnamese were probing the defenses with infantry and sapper teams. The Americans were facing assaults of up to 200 men at a time, as the enemy tested for weaknesses in the line. The Marines were also plagued by hidden machine gun nests, which could open up at any moment, day or night. By now, the attention of the American public was riveted by the Battle of Khe Sanh. The story was being covered by dozens of journalists and was featured on network television every day. Stories about Khe Sanh accounted for 25% of all film news reports about the war on U.S. networks and up to 50% on CBS. Arguments raged over the rights and wrongs of trying to hold the base. In Washington, President Johnson was deeply worried about the fate of the Marines at Khe Sanh. He was constantly demanding the latest information on the battle. A model of the base had even been brought into the White House Situation Room. For the first time in the Vietnam War, the room was on full alert, 24 hours a day. A multitude of doubts and fears haunted the president and his advisors. Should nuclear weapons be used to save the base, as some had suggested? What if the enemy diverted or poisoned the base's water supply? Most worrying of all, what if enemy jets mounted a sudden bombing attack on Khe Sanh? It would be a massive propaganda victory for the North. Although North Vietnamese aircraft did penetrate to within striking distance of Khe Sanh, they made no attempt to attack the Marine base. American air defenses over the DMZ were far too strong. The biggest threat to the Marines at Khe Sanh did not come from modern fighter aircraft. It came from one of the most primitive weapons in warfare. The North Vietnamese besieging Khe Sanh were digging mile upon mile of trenches and bunkers, just as they had at Dien Bien Phu. They were fast approaching the perimeter of the combat base itself. Already there was a major system of North Vietnamese fortifications on Hill 471, less than 2 miles to the south of the Khe Sanh base. Now, at incredible speed, the trench lines were being extended northwards until they reached to within 25 yards of the American perimeter. Another line of trenches and bunkers was creeping across from the southeast.